Thanks, Shana. So I have with me today Sara Menker, who is the founder and CEO of Gro Intelligence. Hey, Sara.
Hi, Jim.
So Sara, I'm so excited to be talking to you today because you've built this platform that can do really powerful and exciting things. But I think one of the problems with understanding what you're doing is it can sound very abstract. You often hear these descriptions of what you're doing couched in terms of AI and predictive algorithms and data sets. So I want to invite you, we'll come to that later, but I want to invite you to start by telling us a story about how people are using your platform. What are they actually doing with it?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with a story around climate change, which is obviously a very big topic. COP26 is coming up at Glasgow, and a lot of food companies and agricultural companies are really thinking about how to repurpose their supply chains for the future. One, to actually just be resilient to climate shocks that are occurring. And then two, is actually to say, are there shifts in products that we need to make as a result of sort of climate change, right? So and when doing that, you need to understand sort of our earth, the soils, the historical weather, that sort of allowed particular crops to grow. So let's take something like coffee. Coffee grows predominantly in parts of South America and parts of East Africa, Vietnam, etc. Well, a coffee tree takes over 5 years to grow. So when you're looking at climate change, one way that sort of people are using the platform today is actually to run particular types of models. So several food companies we work with our land suitability model. Our land suitability model essentially says what regions are most suitable for growing a particular crop. So you can feed it an ideal region that's made up of specific environmental variables, and then it maps against every part of the world and actually generates scores for you to say these are the regions that are most suitable today. And then under different CO2 scenarios and under different climate change scenarios, can say, how are those areas changing over time? And are the places that we're growing coffee today, for example, the most suitable 20 years from now? Or should we be looking at a change?
So I can see it immediately, like how powerful this is, but it seems from your end to be this really daunting challenge. You know, if anyone who's familiar at all with food and ag will know that the data involved is incredibly complex. There's many different commodities grown in different eco-regions. The data is more and less reliable. There are language issues. So give us a sense of how much data you've had to assemble in order to allow this kind of work to happen, and tell us a bit about how you managed to tackle that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I my background was actually in energy before I started Gro. And, the way I describe it is as a natural gas trader, which is what I was. I'd say I wake up every morning and I'd want to know what every molecule of gas was doing across every pipeline around the world every single day. And the way that you do that is by collecting data around pipeline flows or production, et cetera. And that sort of supply versus demand equation led me to sort of take a view on prices and be able to predict price. And it was like, why wouldn't we do the same for agriculture and food? If we want to fix our food systems, we start with understanding it. What I didn't appreciate is, unlike energy, it's not a single crop. It's tens of thousands of different products. Every single one of those products has different set of biological rules that govern how it grows. And it's grown all over the world. And you can have tiny farmers, half-acre farms or 100,000-acre farms. And so the information is significantly more fragmented than the energy industry. And you have huge barriers. One is format, types of the format that the data comes in. Very little of our data that we ingest today comes in a form of a clean API data feed. It's PDF files, it's text, it's emails, it's just very random formats, images, etc. The second is agriculture is highly local. And so the best data about any country tends to come in a local language, not in English. And so there's sort of this problem of fragmentation and sort of complexity and breadth of what it means, but also things like language and format, etc. And really, for me and for us, it started with, let's understand what problem we're solving. I didn't leave to start an AI company or data company. I left to solve a problem, and AI became an enabler. And I think it became less daunting when you think of it that way, because we start with human expertise that understands the vastness of the challenge. And we've been able to ingest and automate over 50,000 data sources into the platform, and are processing hundreds of trillions of data points every single day now. But it was just starting with a problem.
And that 50,000 data sources, I mean, how many languages, for example, do you speak on the team?
Oh gosh, I haven't done a recent count, but would be at over 30 languages on the team. And I always say the AI is only as good as the HI, which is the human intelligence. And the human intelligence part is, it ensures it's not garbage in, garbage out. And that means that we have a very diverse team that spans the spectrum of domains that is important to solving this problem. So we have climate scientists, plant biologists, market research analysts, former traders, so the sort of full gamut. And we marry that with very deep technical expertise and engineering expertise to say, how do you marry the two to scale that knowledge? And that means that we have an incredibly diverse team from a background standpoint, just pure academic and experience, but also nationalities, and it's sort of like a little mini UN.
Right. So let me just try and play the role of the customer here for a minute. So I've signed up to your service. I've used it to predict cotton yields or corn or wheat or something other that's really critical to my business. I then am going to make some decisions. I'm going to make investments here and not somewhere else. I'm going to feel very nervous about that. What kind of guarantees can you give to your customers that actually the outputs, the predictions you're making are likely to be accurate?
I'm so happy you asked that question, because ultimately it's about trust. It's about trust in the data. It's about trust in the methodology. It's about trust in your models. And trust can only be built with transparency. So we've taken a very atypical approach as a company than most AI companies, which is we open up all of our models to our customers. So we say, here's the output, but if you actually want to stress test it, you want to look at the back tests, you want to understand the methodology, it's like we're giving you sort of the raw ingredients, the recipe, and the baked good, and you can sort of start at whatever area you want. And that means that you just build trust. It's really hard because the places that we're sort of running forecasts for could take 1 or 2 years for that data to update, for people to validate whether your model was any good or not. And so really it's transparency. And then we also provide confidence intervals every single day to get a sense of, the range of confidence that we have in the output on that given day. But it's a work in progress, and it's something that we've spent a lot of time doing, which is just building trust.
Right. So I want to finish off with a question for you. So you're sitting on all this data. You and your team presumably are looking at it just out of your own interests. I feel like you've got this incredible crystal ball. So tell us, what are you seeing in the data? What should we all be looking out for in the decades to come?
This crystal ball. I usually ask customers that, which is, if I gave you a crystal ball, what would you want to see? But fine, you can reverse that question to me. Right now, on a short-term basis, what we're seeing is food inflation at sort of record levels in many parts of the world, and not something that's going to go away anytime soon. So it's a little bit worrisome. I think it's basically driven both by supply and demand shocks continuously happening. Supply shocks is much more around climate, and that sort of leads me to sort of longer term, in the decades to come, is really significant lack of predictability in the food that we produce and in our supply chains than we ever had before. And so this ability to sort of see around the corner and plan is it's the most important it's ever been. And I'm not sure people quite get how complicated and how bad it can get in the next decade or two. We're not talking about 50 years from now, where it seems so abstract.
So we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to go a little bit deeper on that, because that's such a critical issue. We know that things climate-wise are going to become less predictable. Are there particular crops that you're concerned about in terms of our inability to be certain what the yields will look like?
No, it's not crop specific, because crops will just shift to other regions. It's specific countries' resiliency to be able to know to make those changes, and whether as society and as a world, these shifts occur in a way that is orderly enough to then facilitate trade flows that look different than the trade flows we have in place today. So it's really whether the world can continue to work together as opposed to being more insular, which is unfortunately the path that we've been taking.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fascinating. I wish we could go on, but we are out of time. I will definitely be watching the development of Gro Intelligence with interest. Back to you, Shana.